danger. Now what happened? There was an event, there was people dedicated to a certain thing that made a change. There was a transformation in what happened. Now I think that, what I want you to grasp from that is that we all have that opportunity to be that change agent when it comes to safety. And so as we walk through 8 steps that represent ways you can do that, because I think in principle it's easy to understand that we can make change and we can be a catalyst. But the reality is, how do we practically do that is the question that we need to answer. So, to start it off, I want to make sure we know that my main goal here is, number one, to talk about these 8 steps and hopefully generate some thought process around it, maybe some discussions later on. But I really want you to be able to inspire you to know that you as a safety person, project manager, department manager, plant manager, whatever your role is, that you have an opportunity to inspire safety change, no matter where you are in the culture of your organization. Now the good part is that I want to commend SCMA for having these workforce conferences, locally, in Columbia and Spartanburg, in areas that make it easy to attend at a reasonable price. So there's 160 people here today, and through this week committed to be able to learn something that hopefully they can implement and apply in that change and that safety transformation. So, I encourage you to make sure you learn all you can through that process, because again, your inspiration, what you do, makes a big difference. But there's one thing that really jumpstarts the whole thing. And let's talk about that. It's really about urgency. Now, when I say urgency, I've given presentations in the past that seem to imply, or people got the sense that urgency and safety was a bad thing. To me, urgency and safety is not a bad thing. It's not about the urgency of responding to an accident or the urgency of something very, very critical or negative. To me, urgency represents a feeling that is focused. All right, now think about this. I mentioned that growing up, I played sports, and football was one of the things I enjoyed doing. And to me, one of the most urgent moments in a football game is 4th and 1. All right, now I want you to think about it. Basketball, it may be 1 and 1 at the free throw line. In golf, it may be that last shot that you can win your match with. In all kinds of sports, there's different things that kind of bring you to the edge of your seat. But to me, urgency in a football game can be seen in a 4th and 1. Let's think about what happens. On 4th and inches, especially at the end of the game, when the game's on the line, you've got both teams fighting for something. You know what I'm saying? You've got one team fighting for that first down, possibly that touchdown. You've got the other team fighting to keep it from happening. It's a moment in time where things matter. All right, think about that. You get on the edge of your seat, you anticipate what's going to happen. You get on the edge of your seat, you focus. If you're that player, your senses are focused on what you have to do. So when I think about urgency, I don't think about it in the critical sense that something went wrong, now we have to fix it. But I think about urgency in the ability to get focused on what you need to do. Now think about it like this too. Urgency in a change effort is that number one step that has to happen. In other words, you have to have in some cases, you have to have a crisis take place before people really wake up and decide, well, now's the time to do something. Is that true? I mean, think about it. In safety, it's easy just to sort of drift where you go in step to step. But when something really happens, the people tend to get their awareness level raised. I mean, think about it. Whether it's an accident, whether it's a serious near miss, there's different things that prompt that urgency. But when it comes to urgency, there's other things that you need to think about. You need to know what it is you want to do. For example, market trends can cause a sense of urgency. When you look at some of the bullets up there, whether it's the market realities or whether it's discussing potential crisis. As leaders in our work environment, if we want to really initiate change, it may be a cultural change. It may be a climate change. It may be a change in attitude. It may be a change in how you do business, a change in a process. It may be a shift in some direction. Now, sometimes you might think, well, there's no real crisis in that. And so what do I do? Well, at some point you got to figure out, in Leading Change, John Carter's book, it makes sometimes you have to create the crisis. Now that's scary in the safety world. When you think about it, you say create a crisis, nobody really wants that crisis in safety. But I'll give you an example of something that can create a crisis, and it just depends on how you look at it. But for example, probably 5 or 6 years ago, when I was working at Fluor, when I first started working at Fluor, in our corporate office in Greenville, one of the initiatives was that, we started talking about corporate PPP and a volunteer protection program with OSHA. So that conversation would pop up in meetings and staff meetings, and there was an interest in corporate PPP. We had sites that were volunteer protection certified. We had different things going on that were related to it. But it was more of a general conversation that never really got off the ground. We did a little research here, a little research there, kind of tested some things out, but it never really took place. But you know what shifted the urgency around that? It was when one of the top executives in Fluor says, "Hey, why don't we have that? Go get it." I mean, that sounds strange, but sometimes that crisis or that urgency comes from the right leader at the right level deciding, this is what we want, go get it. And then things begin to open up. The gates of progress begin to open. And that's kind of what happened at Fluor. From that point forward, there was not an issue of resources to go do it. There was not an issue of commitment to go pursue a volunteer protection program on the corporate level. It was pretty much the expectation. So my crisis was, they said, David, you lead the team to do that. And so my crisis became, oh my, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this across the United States? And so my crisis became, that uh-oh moment on how do I make this happen? But the reality was, there was a strong commitment and emphasis to make that happen. And the urgency came from the leadership in that group. Now that's one example of what can generate positive change. How do you do that on a site level? When I think back to my Duracell days or my Owens Corning days, what typically generated that moment of urgency? Unfortunately, sometimes it might have been an accident. Other times it may have been a corporate initiative that was, put on us to be able to execute. All kinds of different things. But the key that I want us to think about, when we think about that first step in change, is that we need to be able to frame that instant, that thing that makes us want to shift. If you go back to my fitness example, there's that moment where you realize, okay, I need to lose a little weight. My pants are too tight. So there's that moment in that safety context in your facility, in your plant, in your company. You have to come to that point and say, now's the time to make a difference. Now the thing is, you can make that difference no matter where you are and what you do. And so the key is being able to find the urgency, beginning to develop that urgency around that situation.